welcome Rodney, and thanks for being here.
Hey. Gentlemen, how are you all? Now, I tell folks I'm the smallest male in my family, which is true. My father played for the Denver Broncos, but he also was a Baptist minister. And so I had this thing of he believes in laying hands on people. So Rodney Bullard, born and raised in Decatur, Georgia. I mentioned my wife. We were born the same. As you go, Decatur, my friend, where's greater? My wife and I were born in the same hospital 3 days apart. So I literally have known her all my life, which is a blessing and a curse. More blessing than curse. And it is good to be with you all this evening. It's good to be with you all because, quite frankly, as all of us have experienced, we haven't been able to gather like this. And this is new and this is unique once again, all over again. But what's cool is it's all men. What's very cool is we are all here for the purpose of convening to get to know one another, but also convening for fellowship of Christ. And this, quite frankly, I needed. And so the opportunity, Matthew, wherever you are, thank you for your invitation. I appreciate that. I enjoyed my time with Dave and Calder and Clayton because it was a fellowship that I had not had, not in that way. And it makes me think about a lesson that I learned some years ago. On March 30th, 2017, you all may or may not remember, there was the collapse of the I-85 bridge. And I remember that evening because I was going to dinner in Buckhead. Now I live off of Claremont, so I was going south into the city. And I'm driving, and as Matthew said, I was in the military. And I saw this huge cloud of smoke, this black cloud. And the first thing I thought from my military experience was we had been attacked because it looked as if, seriously, a bomb had gone off. And it gave me concern, and soon traffic stopped and we were just sitting there. And I was looking at something and I had no idea what it was. I later learned that this bridge that I grew up going across, that I still go across, and that every day carries over 250,000 cars. Think about the strength of a bridge that carries over 250,000 vehicles that at least weigh 2 tons apiece every day. And it made me think about the vulnerability of myself, my own vulnerability. If this bridge, which can be so strong that it carries all of these vehicles, so strong that it's expected in my life, and I don't even think about it, what might happen in my life when I also have fires? Because come to find out, there was a fire that happened underneath the bridge, and it was the pressure of a fire that collapsed this bridge. And we all have fires in our lives. If we didn't experience a fire over the last year, we probably weren't paying attention or we weren't living. I had over 79 people in my life contract COVID, 3 of whom passed. 1 was a close friend. My godfather is still in assisted living. He was on a ventilator so he started on a ventilator in December of last year. Just got off a ventilator last month. He's been in assisted living since then. So all of us in some form or fashion were impacted. And it made me think about just the need for connection. So a bridge tells me that we all are strong, but we all are vulnerable at the same time. We all can be brought down at the same time. And what keeps us is our purpose. The Bible says that we are the salt of the earth, and what happens when we lose our saltiness? Well, the purpose of a bridge is to connect people. And when that bridge no longer serves its purpose, what good is it? What good is a bridge if it's not connecting people? And what good is connection in our lives if we don't have one another? It's the reason why I'm so excited about this evening, because we need each other. Zoom is great, but it's not the same. The opportunity to watch a television is cool, but it's not this. And we can't take this for granted. Because if we are to be who we are as men, if we are to be who we are in Christ, we need to connect to one another. The Bible says that we are all one in the body of Christ. Dr. King says, I can't be who I'm supposed to be unless you are who you're supposed to be, because we're all related in this intergalactic garment of life. And oftentimes we forget that. It was easy to forget that at times. But there were things such as George Floyd that reminded us this year that we're more alike than we're different. And this sense of equity, whatever word you want to use, it's not just equity for one, but it's equity for all of us. It's connection for all of us. And if we lose that, then we're no better than the bridge on I-85. We've lost our purpose. And the question I ask for you, and I would love to talk to you because I deliberately brought this seat because I want to have as much a conversation as I have a talk, is what's your purpose? If I'm honest with you, I'm thinking about what's my purpose. I've had a wonderful purpose. I've served in the military. I've gone to great schools. I've been an attorney. I've practiced law. I've won big cases. I've been on CNN. I've worked for a chicken company that sells a few chicken sandwiches. This past week, I had an article in Forbes magazine. Did well. But I'm still wondering, what's my purpose? But even more so, what's God's purpose for me? And I think as men, we have to continually ask that question. That there is never a point in which you don't ask that question, because there's never a point in which you're not growing, in which you're not continuing to have new circumstances, new challenges. And it's okay to be transparent about the difficulty of that question, because that's not an easy question for anybody. What's your purpose? But if we don't answer the question, if we leave it unanswered, then we will not have the saltiness. We will not be the bridge. And make no mistake, we are a bridge. I have a 13-year-old son on the autism spectrum. I'm a bridge for him every day. I have to wake up, do my best so that I can be a bridge for him every day. I have a wonderful wife. I need to be a bridge for her. I have two parents who a year and a half ago had strokes in the same week. I have to be a bridge for them. We are that bridge. That fire, if it has not come, it is coming. We have to be strong enough where we don't collapse. And we have to realize our purpose in Christ so that we can continue to carry that which needs to be carried as bridges for our families, as bridges in our jobs, and as bridges in our community. So I would love to open this up for questions, conversation, your thoughts. I want to hear from you. It can be about anything. It can be about Chick-fil-A. No, I don't have the secret recipe. Spicy biscuits, I might have something on that. There you go. There you go. But would love to talk to you all. I've worked at the White House as a White House fellow. It's a wonderful experience. I've been there when Hurricane Katrina washed away parts of New Orleans, Biloxi, Mississippi, and Alabama. I have seen lots of things, but even I am at a point in which I'm thinking about what's my purpose. So I hope this conversation helps me as much as it helps you. So thank you, my friend. I would open it up, please. Now tell me your name, tell me where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Jared Peters. I'm from Normal, Illinois, is where I grew up.
Normal, Illinois. It's close to what city? I've heard of Normal.
Nowhere. It's in the middle of the state.
Middle of the state, there you go. You in Lincoln.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so what do you see as your specific purpose, and then what's your best advice to find someone's specific purpose?
No, great question. I'm gonna start with the first question. What's my advice on finding your purpose? One, I think prayer is finding through prayer that small, still voice that's within you. Because God speaks to us through a whisper. And that means that we have to get the distractions out. And I've often found that I know God's speaking to me because there are more distractions that are around me. There are more things that are catching my eye, catching my attention, that I know, frankly, I don't need to pay attention to. And I think about those times and I try and retreat, and I try and pray, and I try and listen to that small, still voice. And even then, it can be difficult. I used to say in the past, part of your passion is what is your heart's desire? Because the Bible says God will give you the desires of your heart. So if you follow your heart's desire and you listen to that small, still voice, that will, at least for me, has led me to my passion. And I've learned that also passions change and shift. So one passion when I was a kid was football. It led me to the Air Force Academy. I saw a show, LA Law, and I wanted to be a lawyer. That passion led me to something different, which led me to something different. So I think that you have to give yourself allowance. Truett Cathy had this great quote. He said that you have to be available to the unexpected. And sometimes we get into this prescription mode, at least I get into this prescription mode. And so I have to be available for the unexpected opportunity. And that comes from listening to God. It's easier said than done, because the second part of your question is, what's my purpose? And right now, you know, when I got to Atlanta, I thought my purpose was to run for political office. I came home with that purpose. I had created a life and a resume with that purpose in mind. It was based off of the experience that I had, which was limited. And I don't know if that's still my purpose or not. So I'm struggling with that right now, if I'm honest. And so I think that I'm taking the advice as well, and we'll see. So stay tuned. Another question.
In your work with communities, can you give us advice on building and cultivating communities?
Great question. Great question. So the question was, in my work with communities, what advice do I have on building and cultivating communities? So when I first got to Chick-fil-A, we had this big event, and I was given license to convene all of Chick-fil-A staff and employees. And at the time, there was about 3,000 people. And we convened everybody, and we went over to Dr. King's church at Ebenezer. And I remember this young lady gets up and she asked a question, because we were talking about just that question. How do we connect as individuals and as a company to the community? And she said, I'm gonna be honest with you. The communities that you are outlining, we go into, I've never been in those communities. And I'll be honest with you, I don't have a lot in common with them. And I don't know how to connect. And what I was led to tell her was that the first thing you have to do to build community is to treat people as you would want to be treated. And to be a friend. And if you can do that, then you can build connection, then you can build community, and you can help people. Another friend of mine, by the name of Dr. Gregory Ellison, he tells a story. He says that when he was 6 years old, he had an Aunt Dot, and he loved Aunt Dot. Aunt Dot was very smart, PhD, and she would allow him to ask her questions. And at one point, Greg asked her a question and said, hey, I want to know how you change the world. And Aunt Dot said, well, I'll be honest, I don't know how you change the world, but I do know that you can always impact the 3 feet around you. And I took that from Greg, and he teaches that at Emory. And it's a very important lesson, because when you really don't know what to do, you can always look out to see what problems are right there in your midst. I love people who go on mission trips. I think it's so important, so critical. But I don't want us to miss what's right here and the problems that we're driving past to the airport to fly off to see problems elsewhere. when our brothers and sisters right here, all you have to do is look around. We do a lot of work on the west side of Atlanta, and I'm a long-suffering Falcons fan. It's tough. And I would go to the games and I would go home. I would go to the games and I would go home, but it was only when I got to the U.S. Attorney's Office that I realized the predominance of cases we had right across the street from where the Falcons were losing every Sunday. And there was such an issue in those neighborhoods, and I didn't know about it. I wasn't aware, because I wasn't paying attention within my 3 feet. So I would commend you to look around, figure out what you can do in your own space and time. What talents have you been blessed with? What opportunities have you been blessed with? What resources, what connections, and do something within that 3 feet. Doesn't have to be a lot.
Being so successful, can you speak to a time when you fell short or got knocked down?
Oh.
How did you recover from that?
Without question. I think probably like everybody in this room, I think more about the times I've gotten knocked down than I think about the times that I've been successful. And there's good and bad to that. I have to literally force myself to remember and to ruminate on the success, because we can think about the failure and it prevents us from future success. But for me, the success, or the failure rather, also is an encouragement and it's a motivator. There's a little bit of Jordan in me, if you all saw his show, the documentary. And I need to have that foil. But, you know, there have been plenty of times. I grew up in a household where my parents were entrepreneurs, but they were not good entrepreneurs. And so, you know, we use that term entrepreneurship these days, and we automatically assume, oh, you sold your company. Not always the case. So my parents were entrepreneurs, and you know, I always had this thing of I didn't want to be financially in a place of difficulty, and it's always just stood with me. And so there have been deals in which I didn't do well on, like a real estate deal or something like that, and been blessed to do well on more than that, but that stuck with me. Football. I'll never forget my first football game. I went on the football field and I was in 9th grade, and it was the first game I was going to play in. I'm chasing after this boy, and I'm chasing him. I finally get close to him, and I'm about to tackle him. He looks back at me and he says, "Man, look at the scoreboard and look at the time. The game is over. They put you in at the end of the game. You're a scrub." Broke my heart. I still remember that kid. I tried. I did not tackle him. I did not. But by 10th grade, so that was 9th grade. By the end of 10th grade, I was starting in 11th grade, and 12th grade, I was All-State. Because I used that, and I never forgot that kid. And every kid I tackled was that kid, whether he was or not. So look, we all gonna have failure. And football taught me in particular that success is just getting up one more time than you fall down. But even more so, what I'm really continuing to have to remind myself is, don't be afraid of falling down. Don't be afraid of falling down. Because you can get to a point in which you're going well and you don't want to risk anything. You don't have faith in God that He will take care of you like He did the last time and the time before that. And so we have to remember that as we think about success and failure.
What's been a relationship in your life where you had to be like a big bridge for that relationship? And can you explain like a fire that you successfully put out with that relationship?
Yeah. Let me think on that, man. That's a good question. You know, I think the family piece really is a big one. I mentioned my son. And Look, I went to the Air Force Academy. I was blessed to be academically strong and athletically strong in high school and in college. I got a scholarship to go to Duke Law. I was a graduation speaker at Duke Law. I left there and went to the University of Georgia. I made all A's at the University of Georgia, or something close to it, whatever. And then I have a son who's on the autism spectrum. And the fear that he might not be able to accomplish the things that I've accomplished. And that was, quite frankly, a fire for me. And not knowing how to help him, to bridge for him, to even connect with him, because part of his issue is just a social, emotional connection. And that's been difficult. But I'll say this, it has been through prayer, it's been through a wonderful praying wife that we have been able to do for him and to be a bridge for him. He now is in 7th grade and he made his first B ever just recently. Made a B in English and he's very upset about that. And I'm sure that he will make an A next year. He came back with 10 awards and we put him out on a table to see all the awards that he had accumulated. And no, he may never ever be exactly as I am, and that's okay. But every day, I have to be a bridge for him. And for you all, if you haven't experienced it already, your children will likely be some of the greatest fires in your life. And they will create opportunity and love and joy, but they also will create uncertainty, consternation, and concern, because that's what being a parent's about. And at the end of the day, it is one of, if not your greatest responsibility. I've had fires in jobs. I had fires at Chick-fil-A. I've had my name 2019, in March of 2019, I was called every name other than a child of God. Over 1 billion impressions in March, over 2 billion, I believe. Glenn can tell you in December, or November rather, going into December. 2 different groups, one on the left, one on the right, neither one liked me that much. Facts, uncertain, unclear, false, frankly. And I had to learn to be strong in that. Because one thing I'll tell you about leadership is, if you go out front and lead, you will take arrows. But if you've been called to lead, you have an obligation to continue to go forward. And I found that those experiences, frankly, strengthened me in a way and refined me in a way that I never thought that they would. And they were blessings, although at the time I didn't see them as such, but they were blessings. So hopefully that answers your question.
Could you talk to us about mentorship? Who were some of your influences and mentors, and how you went about finding that relationship with somebody that could direct you?
Absolutely, one of my favorite topics. So mentorship is so important to me. Both my own personal ability to mentor others and my ability to be mentored. And I still have mentors. I still have people who sharpen my iron. Glenn Jackson, right over here, I consider to be a friend and a mentor. And I sought mentors out. It was actually one of the things that, if I say what has been something that I've done successfully, it has been seeking out mentorship. And I've always had that, and I've always had that gene in me. And I've always understood that network is important, and it's not a bad word. Because connection and relationship, they make the world go round. And early on, I would connect. I'm a White House Fellow. Sanjay Gupta's a White House Fellow. Colin Powell's a White House Fellow. You probably don't know the program, but you do know White House Fellows. I had a mentor. Actually, I'll take it a step back. I was working in the admission office at the Air Force Academy. It was my very first job after graduation. This lady calls me. Her name was Icy Barton. She was from Charleston, South Carolina. She talked to me for 3 hours, 2 minutes, and a few seconds because I timed it. And I wanted Miss Icy to leave me alone. She wanted her child, Charles Barton, to get into the Air Force Academy. And I was the admissions officer. At about 2 hours and 59 minutes, when I thought Miss Icy was finally kind of ramping down and I was going to be able to get away, she asked me, well, I've talked to you for a long time. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to go to Harvard Law School. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a JAG, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. I will make sure I take care of Charles. She said, well, I'm going to introduce you to a guy by the name of Will Gunn. He's going to call you. I thought nothing of it. I got off the phone. 10 minutes later, this gentleman by the name of Will Gunn calls me. Will Gunn was, at the time, a major in the Air Force, and he had gone to the Air Force Academy. He had gone to Harvard Law. He was a lawyer, and he said, I also worked in the admissions office that you're working in now. Will became my mentor. I became a White House Fellow because Will mentored me. Will later was on the cover of Time magazine. He was the very first, he was the defense attorney for the detainees at Guantanamo Bay. He was the general counsel for the VA, the Veterans Administration. Will is an amazing man and still an amazing mentor. I have plenty of other mentors, some with bigger titles and some that you all would recognize, some billionaires, but Will was a mentor for me at an early age. And I fashioned my life. And he wasn't just a mentor that I could look at and say, I want to be like you. Will was a mentor who said, I want to pull you along. Because Will had some big jobs later on from being a major. He was working at the Pentagon, and he asked me when I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, what I wanted to do, and he pulled me along. And this sense of agency is so important, that you find mentors that will offer you agency, but you offer others agency. Allow me to introduce you all to Charles Brooks. Charles, raise your hand. I have done my best, maybe not successfully, I'm just joking, to mentor this young man. Charles is has been a Chick-fil-A fellow, and we every year find a Chick-fil-A fellow to come in and to shadow us. And mentorship is so important, and one of my proudest achievements is that we've had interns and we've had fellows, which are different than interns. They're full-time executives who've graduated, worked elsewhere, who have done great things. And that is an accomplishment. At the end of the day, you should look back through your life and you should say, whose life have I touched? Who is in my coaching tree? Nick Saban can look out and say, this is my coaching tree. Who's in your coaching tree? I had another question right here.
Was there a moment in your educational and professional development that you think really springboarded you, that kickstarted your career, whether it be raising your hand and asking a hard question or taking a project that no one else wanted?
Yeah. I think there are moments that we kind of have this wormhole moment where we just move very quickly from one place to another. And I think that you have to be on the lookout for those moments. Consequently, those moments also are moments in which I have to remind myself that they occur, because I can be impatient. And I can think, well, you know, it's been so long, but I can realize that God can move me quickly from point A to point B. And even though it's long in my terms, He can move us quickly. One moment was, and all these moments, what they have in common have been a matter of faith and boldness. So I graduated from the Air Force Academy, and they put me in computers. Now, little did I know I should have stayed in computers because all those folks are really, really rich. But I wanted to be a lawyer. And we had won the Commanders-in-Chief trophy. So as a football team, we had beaten Navy and we had beaten Army for the 100th time. I thought that would get somebody. And so we went to go see the President of the United States. At the time, President Clinton was the President of the United States. we go there, and I am upset about being in computers. And I told myself, I'm gonna meet somebody, even if it's the president, who's gonna get me out of computers. I'm not doing this, I'm going to law school. I woke up and I see a guy who had more stars than I had ever seen, and I introduced myself. I said, hello, my name is Cadet Rodney Bullard. I'm from Decatur, Georgia, and I would like to meet you. Can I come visit you during the summertime? Come to find out, he was the #2 general in the Air Force. So General Mormon was his name. General Mormon was a little bit taken back by my brashness, and he said, okay, come visit me. So I found General Mormon, I wrote him a letter, and he did, in fact, invite me up. I sat with General Mormon for all of probably 4 minutes and a few seconds. It was less than 5 minutes. And I told him that I wanted to be an attorney, that I was not built for computers, but I was wanting to be an attorney. And at the end of it, he got up. He didn't promise anything. He just got up and he said, thank you. It was good to meet you. Now, at this point, Lieutenant Bullard, I graduated, and he ushered me out. I received a package in the mail for a JAG application about 2 weeks later. And then when I called to see if I was still in computers, they said, you know, you don't work in computers anymore. You work in personnel, and we understand that you're going to be applying to law school. So take the opportunity to be brash in a faithful way. And that was one moment that moved me. Again, I may have should have stayed in computers, but I probably would not have done as well as Bill Gates, I promise you that. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks so much for coming to visit with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for serving. I have 3 boys that studied there also.
I love it.
And I'm not sure even on purpose, but we've been praying that it would intersect somehow.
Yes.
They think they're serving and doing good work, and they are.
Yes.
But we'd love for it to intersect with a
Purpose.
greater purpose.
Amen.
What do you tell a young cadet? I have a first lieutenant and a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
And a rising firstie, I guess, a 4th year in the Air Force. And I hope that they can figure out how to weave that together.
Yep. Yep. It's a great question. So the question was, my friend has 3 children who have gone to the Air Force Academy or are attending the Air Force Academy. So bless you, and thank you for your service, for 1, allowing them to go, and 2, preparing them for such an education. Because the Air Force Academy is not easy. To say it's college is probably being kind. It is more of a medium security prison that teaches you calculus. In fact, I was a pre-law major, so we did in fact go visit a prison, like one of those supermax prisons in Colorado, and I was like, really? We had that rule too? Really? So I graduated or escaped. But I'll tell you this, when I graduated, I didn't understand the purpose of the education. I thought it was just part of me achieving something. It was a notch in the belt. It was more for me than it was for anything else. And when I got to, and I went through law school like that, frankly. I applied to law school, went to Duke. I achieved a goal. It was more for me. I then went down to Biloxi, Mississippi, Keesler Air Force Base. And I never thought that I would see the sun rise and set in Mississippi as a resident, but it was a wonderful place. I love Biloxi. And I remember I tried my first case. It was a hearing, actually. And the hearing was so important for me because I had done mock trial in high school. I was all state in mock trial in high school. I had done all this stuff and all county mock trial in high school. And I'd done all this stuff, and I was really just excited about it. And I called my first witness, and my witnesses were in this witness room, and they actually had a television. And I don't know for the life of me still why all my witnesses were together, but they allowed that, but neither here nor there. They were watching television, and I called a witness, and then the bailiff, because it was a hearing, I was the one going back and forth getting the witnesses, so I really didn't have a bailiff. But I asked them to come, and one witness was slow and didn't come. And I had to call a recess, and I'll go back and I see what's happening. And I called the witness's name, and no one answered me, even though I was as close as I am to you all. And then they pointed at the television. And as they pointed at the television, I saw smoke coming from, it looked like buildings in New York City. And I realized that this was 9/11 and that the Twin Towers were under attack. And this whole sense of self, this whole sense of I was doing this because I wanted to go to law school, because I wanted to get a good education, because I wanted to make money, it went out the window. Because it had been challenged very directly by 9/11. My assistant is a lady by the name of Rosalind Reynolds. On that day, Rosalind Reynolds was in one of the towers. She was in the second tower. They had already seen the first tower be hit. They were told to stay in place. Roz is a very sweet lady, relatively meek. And she said, no, we're not going to stay in place. And she started to run and lead others. Somehow she got out of the towers. Her boss got into an elevator that did a free fall, in which everybody else in the elevator with him passed away. And Roz was one of a handful of people to make it out of either tower. The purpose of being in the military is greater than self. But even more so, the purpose of serving in the military is to teach us that we have a purpose elsewhere. And it's not always just to protect the country, but there is a purpose elsewhere. And so I hope that your children, I hope they never have a 9/11 moment, but I hope that they understand at some point that the education, that the service, that it is to help someone else. I'm going to dismount on this. When I was 6 years old or so, my father went to Morehouse College. And my father, his mentor in college was a guy by the name of Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. He was Mays High School here in Atlanta. Dr. Mays was the legendary president of Morehouse College. He also was a mentor for Dr. Martin Luther King. And my father wanted me to meet Dr. Mays. That's all right. My father wanted me to meet Dr. Mays. And Dr. Mays was at the end of his life as I was a young boy. And Dr. Mays put me, my father put me on the phone with Dr. Mays, and Dr. Mays said this. He said, I want you to get as much education as possible. I want you to get great experiences. I want you to have a great life. But I want you to understand that that education, those experiences, they're not for you. They're so that you can help someone else. They're so you can leverage for your community. They're so you can give back. And that always stuck with me, even as a young man. It stuck with me. I don't remember the rest of the conversation. I probably had some on television, cartoons, G.I. Joe, whatever, but I do remember that. So if you share that with your children, I hope that that resonates. Thank you. Thank you again for your service.
Yeah, man, you have to be pulled in a million different directions. Everybody wants a piece of your time. Everybody wants a piece of Rodney. First off, thanks for saying yes tonight. It's all a good cause. All the people that want a piece of it. How do you decide what to say yes to?
Yeah, great question. How do you decide what to say yes to? Because yes, I am pulled in a million different directions. It is a blessing to be pulled in a million different directions. It's a blessing to be wanted. It is not a blessing to kill yourself. It's not a blessing to diminish yourself either. And I have had times in which I've shown up less than myself. If you just think about the blurring that can happen if you pull something apart and you show up tired, you show up less effective than you could be because you've been pulled in a million different directions. So I have learned to guard my heart and my time. I have learned, one, I try and take Fridays and make those a day in which I keep the calendar clear. I try and take a day of the week for me. And I also try and limit those who don't appreciate my time. That is hard sometimes, but you have to do your best with that. And how do you determine which you're going to give your time to? It is easier said than done. And some people say, well, you should only give your time to the extraordinary. But frankly, I have gravitated to give my time to that which relationally fulfills me. If I have a relationship with somebody, that probably will trump the yes versus the no. If I, there's a strategy to some things that I say yes to. If I need to get something done, if I need that. But oftentimes, I have found that for me, I will gravitate to that which relationally fulfills me. This group, as I said earlier on, fulfills me. I get something out of it. I think it's important. Now, yeah, could I say that I have other meetings? Yes. I got the Tennessee Bankers Association next week, Charleston, South Carolina. There's thousands of people. That's going to be wonderful. It's a different speaking engagement than this. But I have found that I have to guard my heart, and that which fulfills me but doesn't pull me apart is important. And I can't do everything as much as I want to, because that's how I'm built. I really, really want to do everything. And I have to mind myself that I can't do everything. And then I have to push back and say no. And I have to understand, and this is really hard for me, that I'm going to disappoint some people sometimes. I'll say that one more time. I'm going to disappoint some people sometimes, and that is okay. Another question I saw right here.
You talked about transitioning from your computer's role to law. How did you make the shift from law to where you are now?
Great question. So basically, how did I become a knuckle-dragging chicken salesman? So I, very similar in some ways. So I practiced law. I loved practicing law. I absolutely love the courtroom. I come alive in the courtroom. It's a place that I enjoy. But I always realized that it was limiting. It was in the courtroom. My victories are in the courtroom. They were not seen. And frankly, I could help people, but I couldn't help a lot of people. And I got an opportunity because Sally Yates was my U.S. attorney. I come back to Atlanta, worked at the U.S. Attorney's office here in Atlanta. Sally Yates was the U.S. attorney. We talked about doing work on the west side of Atlanta because, again, long-suffering Falcons fan realized that the west side was an issue, and we need to do something about that. And Sally had this saying, we can't prosecute our way out of these problems, which I thought was a wonderful saying and is very true. And so we started this program. I was blessed to do that under her leadership. And I also said, I like law, but I want to see if there's something else out there. So I went back to business school. And consequently, at the same time, I had gotten an award for Outstanding Atlanta, 10 Outstanding Young Atlantas, whatever. And I sent an email, so this power of connection. I sent an email to mentors of mine in DC, where I had just come from, all over the country. A mentor of mine emailed me back. She was the ambassador to Trinidad. Obama had just won. She had raised a lot of money for Obama. Her family's very wealthy. Her husband's very wealthy. They had given a lot of money to the Obamas. She invited me to Trinidad. She said, I have Colin Powell and Justice Thomas coming, and I want you to come. I said, there's something wrong with this threesome, but I'm going to come. So I came, not at the same time as those two, although I met both of them. And I came down, and she had me speaking to thousands of kids, literally. It was a wonderful experience. And one night, we saw this Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was open 24 hours. It's the highest grossing, at least at the time, highest grossing Kentucky Fried Chicken, at least in the Caribbean or the world. I'm from Atlanta. I'm a homer. So I said, well, if you love Kentucky Fried Chicken, you need to get a Chick-fil-A. And a friend of mine on that trip, because I brought some friends from Morehouse College, I brought some students from Morehouse College that I wanted to mentor, they said, well, we should get a Chick-fil-A here. I said, I don't know about that. So I go back, I tell the story to a friend of mine in business school. A friend of mine in business school then says, yes, we should get a Chick-fil-A there in Trinidad. Like, I don't know about this. She said, I'm going to introduce you to a guy by the name of Al Mead. He knows Dan Cathy. I was introduced to Al Mead. I said, Al, I don't know about the Chick-fil-A and Trinidad thing, but let me tell you my heart. Let me tell you what I think my purpose is. I think my purpose is helping people who can't help themselves, speaking for people who can't speak up for themselves. So the whole Trinidad thing, Chick-fil-A, don't worry about that. Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. He said, I want you to meet Dan Cathy because I think he will appreciate not the Trinidad piece, because they aren't in Trinidad, but what you said about your heart. He introduces me to Dan Cathy. And I meet Dan and some others who know Steve Franklin. And it was one early morning. They had been riding Harley Davidsons all throughout the night. And we connected over this sense of helping people. And me being vulnerable enough to tell my story, and me following my passion and what I thought my purpose was, led me from law to Chick-fil-A. Now, God clearly had a hand in the rest of it, because I shouldn't have been in Trinidad. I shouldn't have been chasing in any form or fashion a Chick-fil-A in Trinidad. I don't know how KFC got into the story, but it was. And so then I meet Dan, and I've been in Chick-fil-A. And at some point, something told me to talk about, hey, do you have a corporate foundation? And he said, no, not really. And we started the Chick-fil-A Foundation. It had some iterations prior to that and some names prior to that, but essentially that's what we started. So you got the long story. I do.
Talk about how important it is for you to tell your story completely and make it your personal story.
How important it is to tell my story? Absolutely. Well, since you've read my book, Michael, and you know my Naval Academy friend, Les Bruce, which I appreciate, I'm going to tell one of the stories and one of the sentinel stories in the book. Because I think it's important to tell. So I wrote the book because, and it's called Heroes Wanted. You all will get a copy. These gentlemen have been wonderful enough to provide you a copy of this book. And, you know, we talk about leadership, but in my mind, we really should be talking about our opportunity to be someone else's hero. And we also talk about leadership in this way that is bigger than life. And when we talk about heroism, we particularly think of it as someone else is bigger than me. I can't be a hero. My son just got a chance to talk to Anthony Mackie. He is Falcon on Falcon and Winter Soldier. And so my son was just thrilled. But he's a superhero on TV. He's a man in real life. And the truth of the matter is, we don't have superheroes in this world. Christ was our only superhero. He'll come again. But we all have Christ in us. And we all have the ability to be someone else's hero. And we all have our own frailty. As I said, we're all vulnerable. None of us are perfect. None of us can do everything. And when I was 6 years old in first grade, I was attending a school that is still in existence today, a wonderful school, private school. And my parents, my father, a Baptist minister, and my mother, an educator, scraped to send me to the school. And I had no idea at the time that they were scraping to send me to this prestigious private school. And I would dread going to the school every day. And the reason why I would dread going was because I was not reading on grade level. And at some point, one of the teachers or administrators or whomever with the school called my mother and said, Mrs. Bullard, Rodney's not reading on grade level. And my mother, an educator herself, had to make a choice because they were proposing to put me in a developmentally slower class. And my mother thought about African-American child, large African-American child in the South. What are the ramifications of that? And she was a bridge for me. And she said, no, I'm not going to put my child in a developmentally slower class. She said, I'm going to change schools, and she put me in a church school called Rainbow Christian Church School, Columbia Drive, Decatur, Georgia. It's no longer there. It was not prestigious then. It might have been. It wasn't. But, and it's no longer in existence. And I remember going there, and I got there in December, so it was in the middle of the school year. And I remember getting there, and they had these gray cinder block walls. Now, I had never been to prison, particularly at the age of 6 or 7. But this was prison to me. It looked like prison. I still can see those gray cinder block walls in my mind at this point, at this age. And this little lady comes out, and her name is Mrs. Janie Adams. And Mrs. Adams was the very first gnome that I ever met, because I was taller than Mrs. Adams in 1st grade. And I was deathly afraid of Mrs. Adams, because I was like, what is this? This ain't normal. And I'm in prison, new school, and I can't read. It's not cool. So I cried, I fell out on the floor. I remember this today as well. I fell out on the floor, they picked me up, they brought me back into the classroom, and Mrs. Adams was my 1st grade teacher. And at the end of the school year, Mrs. Adams also called my mother, and she said, Mrs. Bullard, Rodney's not reading on grade level, but I would like to take him for the summer. Mrs. Adams lived in Avondale Estates, and I lived in South DeKalb, Gresham Road, and not far from one another, miles from one another, but it could have been different between heaven and earth. And I go there, and I spend time with Mrs. Adams. Mrs. Adams didn't look like me. Mrs. Adams didn't live in the neighborhood I lived in. Mrs. Adams was shorter than me. Mrs. Adams spent her summer teaching me to read. And I was upset because I thought I was giving up my summer, but now as an adult, I realized Mrs. Adams was giving up her summer too. And at the end, absolutely. And at the end of the summer, I was reading 2 grade levels ahead of my peers. Mrs. Adams was a hero for me. Now, Mrs. Adams wasn't a billionaire. Her name is not going to go down in history beyond my history or the history of the children that she taught. But she was a hero for me. And I needed that hero at that moment. I didn't know it, but God gave it to me. And my mother was a hero for me because she had a hard decision. She could have easily just pipelined me into another class. Every one of us has the opportunity to be a Mrs. Adams for somebody in some way. And we have an obligation to seek that out or just be aware enough in life to respond when that opportunity is presented. And so I encourage you to be someone's hero. I encourage you to connect with one another because it's important. I encourage you to be a bridge for one another because you need one another. I encourage you when the fires are there to support one another. I encourage you to be a bridge for somebody else. And I encourage you to continue to find your purpose in Christ. God bless you. Thank you for your time.